Hunting, and why in God's name they gave Pierre Cruzattee a rifle, I have no idea with his eyesight. But Lewis is along the banks of the river in the willows and they're hunting for elk. And Cruzat ends up shooting Lewis in the butt. He thought Lewis was an elk. Is it all right if I share one or two more real
Yeah,
quickly?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. They had along a Frenchman named Pierre Cruzattee, and Cruzattee was their cook. He was like the camp cook, and he could play the fiddle pretty well. So at night, when they'd be sitting around the fire and all pretty tired and things like that, he'd play the fiddle, and sometimes they'd sing. Sometimes they'd even have enough energy to dance a little bit and have some fun. But Pierre Cruzattee had a problem. He couldn't see very well. He was nearsighted, very nearsighted. He could see things right in front of him, but distance was a real problem, and he didn't have glasses. So at one point, and they had found that grizzly bears were pretty tough to kill when they finally ran into grizzly bears. And at one point, they were out hunting for buffalo, and Cruzattee mistook a grizzly bear for a buffalo. And he shot the darn thing, and luckily he escaped with his life because one bullet in a grizzly bear wasn't going to do it. And he got chased by the grizzly, but luckily he got back and made it. Well, unfortunately, on the way back from the West Coast, which is they're gone like almost 2.5 years basically, but they're on the way back now. And at this point, all their clothing is worn out. So what they're wearing is pretty much buckskins. They're wearing clothing that they made either from elk or deer or whatever, antelope, whatever. And they would use these hides to make their clothing. So they're out hunting. And why in God's name they gave Pierre Cruzattee a rifle, I have no idea with his eyesight. But Lewis is along the banks of the river in the willows and they're hunting for elk. And Cruzattee ends up shooting Lewis in the butt. He thought Lewis was an elk. He sees him going through the willows there, and he shoots at him. Well, luckily for Lewis, it hit him in the buttocks, and it wasn't a very serious injury. However, Lewis could not sit down in the kayak, or not the kayak, in the canoe, all the way back to St. Louis. He had to kneel the whole way back because of the injury there. So there was a lot of really weird things that happened, and one of the best ones is there was a guy named Hugh McNeil who was part of the group. But when they left, by the way, when they left from Fort Mandan, which was in North Dakota, that's where they stayed the first winter. They sent some of the men back to St. Louis with some of the things that they had collected. By the way, they discovered something like 178 new plants and 122 new animals that were unknown to science at that point. So
Oh,
this
wow.
was quite an expedition. Anyway, they left Fort Mandan with only 31 people plus Sacagawea and her baby, who was known. His name was actually Jean Baptiste, but he was known as Little Pomp. And then also with Seaman, the dog. Okay, that's where they left from there. Anyway, they're coming back now. They're on the way out. They decided to cache or dig a hole and put in some of their supplies and bury them so that on the way back they'd be able to dig them up and have them. They didn't have to take all these things with them. They didn't need all of it. And on the way back, they sent Hugh McNeil out to find the cache, okay, so they could dig it back up. And as he's going out on horseback, and he's getting pretty far from camp at this point, searching for this spot, a big grizzly came out of the willows, scared the daylights out of his horse. His horse reared up. McNeil fell off. And when the horse threw him, he kind of landed right near where the big grizzly was. And this big grizzly reared up. And McNeil, fortunately, his rifle landed right next to him. He grabbed the barrel of his rifle, okay, and he stood up quickly and he swung and whacked the grizzly right on top of the head with the wooden stock. Well, it broke the stock off of the gun, but it stunned the grizzly just enough, believe it or not, for him to be able to run over and climb a tree. And he was stuck there for like 3 hours. That's what he estimated the time to be before that grizzly finally gave up and wandered off. And then he had to go and find his horse, which had wandered off about a half a mile after this whole incident. So again, lot of neat things happened. It's the best part of history, really, when you when you think about it,
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
find out about all these kind of cool things, you
Yeah,
know.
that's fair.